The sun's light came trickling into the small village through the canopy of the forest towel. Up before the sun even began to rise, Amo helped his father in loading the family cart with the produce he would be taking into the city. In this time the older Vulpine asked his son, with knowledge of his son's desire to pursue being an adventurer, to at least return to the village in 10 days' time, as a clan meeting had been called for then, and he wanted to begin passing the title of head of the family to his eldest. Pounding knocks on his door woke Gwenllian, causing him to open it to find a human male in his late teens dressed in fineries, calling for a companion of his to wake to join him, mentioning something about the Vulpines gathering to do a thing in his own words. The thing. Seeing Gwenllian and not his friend, the boy was startled, but recognizing that he had gone to the wrong room, stepped 3 feet to the side, knocked on a different door, and repeated the process, quickly being joined by another well-dressed teen from within. Gwenllian, having been woken from the interaction, gathered his things and exited the room shortly after the disturbance, to find Leif and Gregor's rooms already vacated, and so stepped to Jonah's door to wake him to get the day's beginning started, before stepping downstairs to join his Tabaxan and Dwarven companions for a breakfast of eggs, bacon, and the fish of the night before, all served cooked by a different young girl than the one they had met the night before. With the cart loaded, the father and son Vulpine made their way from their family abode to the center of town, where gathering of many Vulpines, several with carts of their own, many simply on foot, had formed. A general liveliness filled the air about the collection as the small people spoke with each other about their evenings, their families, and their plans for the day. Several broke away from the conversation they had been engaged in when the Cinquade cart turned onto the main street to be visible to them, with Amos sitting with his father and receiving the surprised gaze of many of the eyes breaking away from their conversations. He dismounted his family's cart with a farewell nod to his father, moments before the cart pulled away, and the timid white-haired Vulpine was bombarded with questions and well wishes about his journey. With no answers to give for any of the questions asked of him, and with no more than a smile to give in response to the well wishes, Amo found his way from the crowd and to a bench on the street side of the wall around the village hall. He pulled a flute from his backpack, and as the other Vulpines began to sing and dance and play musical instruments of their own in a traditional song of travel, he joined in, only with his contribution getting farther and farther separated as the caravan, the Vulpine procession for Highcrest, began to make its way for the waiting capital city, and continued marching along, even as his sound began to fade from their chorus. Breakfast had, the trio inside the Giddy Fox ascend the stairs once more to investigate into the level of being ready to leave of Jonah, who, having shaved and dressed himself for the day, had begun lacing his boots, when, after refusing to respond to a knock at his door he believed to be his companion's, he heard a click from the door, the lock being unlatched, and the door being swung open. He instantly drew a card from his pocket and threw it at the hallway wall opposite his door, causing a familiar white cloud to burst out, washing over everyone, himself included. Leif and Gwenllian, who both were stood in the doorway, dropped to their knees and found their way to the ground, drifting into a magical sleep, as Jonah put his hand to his head, the magic not having quite enough energy to cause him or Gregor to fall to its power. Standing, he stepped to the two he had put to sleep, and with a slap woke Gwenllian, who instantly received a scolding for breaking into the room, before stepping to head downstairs. Gregor hoisted Leif onto his shoulders, carrying him down, and Gwenllian quietly followed. As the rest of the music of the Vulpine procession faded from his ear, Amos stood from his bench seat, and stepping through the Tory gate, went to the village shrine, and said a prayer before returning to see if the others were ready to head out. Jonah had stepped to the bar to inquire about a morning meal, but seeing the others step past him for the door, decided to go without, and joined them in leaving. Leif came to consciousness 1 minute after having been put to sleep, just before Gregor could get him to the door, and they recollected themselves, stepping out to be greeted by Ammo, ready to head out. So that is what they did. Stepping along the road that the Vulpine caravan had preceded them along, and reaching the larger main road that led out of the Highcrest, they walked in each other's quiet company for a little over an hour before the city itself began piercing into the horizon into view. It is a sight that few become used to, the man-made mountain, the city of Highcrest, rising into view as a group approaches it. A pillar of terraces of worked stone, rising, surrounded by plains that hold only spots of trees and small patches of farmland. Outer walls that rise more than 1,000 feet into the air, brilliantly reflecting in their gray the risen sun's beams down upon the approaching group, with sections rising even higher within. A wall so colossal that reaching the titanic gatehouse has it reach from horizon to horizon, with a ramp wading through each gatehouse, rising to meet the street level of the city, halfway up the height of the walls. For Leif and Gregor, the sights and sounds and smells remained foreign to them as their group stepped past the guard who passingly requested their purpose for entering the city. But for the others, the clots of people shifting, moving from building to building through the streets, and stopping and collecting at vendor carts, the sounds of densely packed population, all trying to convey things to others in a cacophony of voices, mixed with the sounds of boots and wagon wheels on stone, as well as the sounds of artisans at work, topped with the scents of fresh bread and cooking foodstuffs, intermingling with the morning stench of chamber pots emptied into the streets, barely masked by the smell of lavender and lilac that emanates from the purple oil that is released from pipes into the gutters of the outer ring, set into the minds of Gwenlwen, Ammo, Jonah, the feeling of familiarity. Through the streets they made their way straight for the front door of the Ivory Shield, and entering found a happy for their return Astrel, who bounced to her desk producing 3 pouches of coin, 2 of which were full, holding 50 coins of gold apiece, and the third of which that sat not even half full. Extending her hand, she asked for the 2 potions back, expecting them to have not had any need to have been used, only to reach for the pouches as they were pulled from the tabletop and passed to Leif by Jonah, who expressed in a stern, cold voice and expression that sent dread into Astrel that the potions were used, and that the 2 of them needed to talk. Wanting to use enough of the coin from the reward of the quest to reimburse the guild for the potions the group had used, Astrel wanted to ask for some of the coin back, but honestly, having been filled with the fright of Jonah's look at her and the tone in his voice, she recoiled and gestured for the room behind the desk, which the 2 of them stepped into. Moments passed as the others waited outside, splitting the coins evenly and following Jonah's instructions to give Ammo and Gregor increased shares. After which Jonah re-emerged, having said any piece he needed to say, and from behind him burst out, running up the stairs to the rooms on the 2nd floor, a sobbing Astrel. Seeing Astrel distraught, Gwenlwen flared his wings in an angry pose for Jonah, asking what the man had done, before running after the small Vulpine, quickly joined by Ammo. Gregor and Leif, wanting to see the city, and not knowing when or if Astrel would come back down to talk to them, left to see if now that they were adventurers who had completed a quest, they would be allowed to enter a higher level of the city, to which they discovered they were still not granted access, and were informed that the Ivory Shield was in fact considered a laughingstock among the guards and guilds, and that to even have a chance at entering the higher levels, they would need to find prestige in a more reputable guild, and were given the example of the Storm Crows, whose guild hall could be pointed to from the gatehouse they had found themselves at. With this, they stepped to explore the outer ring of Highcrest. Gwenlwen and Ammo reappeared at the door leading from the balcony on the 2nd floor to where the rooms on the 2nd floor wait, and stepped down to the 1st floor, where Jonah sat alone, sipping a glass of whiskey he had poured for himself. Guelwyn gathered ingredients from the basement and began cooking an egg drop soup in hopes it would lighten Astrel's spirits, and Amo stepped from the building with the intentions of finding the guild the other adventuring group whose skulls he carried had belonged to. He found his way to the quest registration office to find a waiting line of governmental arbitration, and after waiting an hour, seeing only 4 or 5 people actually have their needs met, and only one line being open, he left heading back to return to the Ivory Shield. In that time, Leif and Gregor visited a smith, which Gregor asked if he could use their forge some time to keep his skills honed, and a magical implements shop, where a misunderstanding on Leif's part of the process of expanding his understanding of magic led him to become worried of the shopkeep's scrutiny and leave before actually purchasing anything, causing both of them to begin their way back to the Ivory Shield as well. Before Amo or Leif and Gregor could arrive once more at their group's guild hall, after Astrel had reappeared in the tavern space, wearing a face that held no signs of the sobbing she had broken into from her conversation with Jonah, and after he had helped get the tavern section set up for the day's business, Jonah left on his own business, only to return after the others had all gathered around a table unsure of what their next collective step may be. In the meantime, Amo had met and played alongside a performer Astrel was allowing to perform and collect tips in the tavern section, a halfling girl in her teens, with pink, almost white hair and vibrant yellow eyes, who wore an outfit of vivid pink and carried on her person very little. When Jonah did return, he gave Astrel the coin for a second whiskey, having overpaid her for the one he had poured himself before, and stepping once again behind the bar, poured his glass before returning to the companions he would have called strangers 7 days before. They discussed their next step, and noticed Astrel listening in, which upon noticing her, caused her to jump back to work, before they asked if she might happen to have had any other quests come in, and she leapt across the room to the front desk, where she revealed 3 small bundles of paper, one being the paperwork for a quest asking for a single group of adventurers from a noble, looking for someone to guard him on a wild boar hunt. One as a general request for any volunteers willing to receive compensation for being the subjects of an alchemist's experiments in the university ring. And last, a bundle of general information pages of people with bounties on them from different towns and enforcers of law. Not interested in any of the available quests at the moment, Jonah took note of the faces in the bounties, and the group agreed to return in a few days to see if anything else might come up. With that settled, a thought came to Amo, causing him to ask Astrel if by chance she knew which guild the other adventuring group had belonged to, and explaining that she had looked into it shortly after her group had left, she learned they were from the Storm Crows. Not explaining why he asked, Amo set off to deliver the morbid news of the other party's fate, and was joined by his 4 companions in the trip. The streets moving in a constant, busy, ventricular flow as they had all day, and as the group had ever known them to, brought the 5 to the square just north of the road that leads into the gatehouse up to the merchant's ring that Gregor and Leif had visited earlier that day. On the right of that road they could see the Gothic cathedral-esque structure that is the guild hall of the Stormcrows Adventuring Guild, and it is in the moment that their eyes set upon the structure, that their steps become focused in its direction, that the ground beneath them began to rumble and shake, stopping them before bursting from the street in front of the guild hall's doors, a behemoth monster with the appearance of a giant frog, with 4 long, powerful tentacles protruding from its sides instead of front legs, and 3 stubby eye stalks protruding from the top of its head. And looking at the structure before it, the monster releases a terrifying roar,